So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we have what I would call a pseudo-siege in that we are playing on Hobbiton, and this one was sent to me by Death Eater, so big thank you to him for sending me the battle replay. And originally I was going to do a Moria siege, but I think the Moria siege can wait until after this one, because after all, the last battle included a very heavy focus on the hobbits, and so we may as well see the home of the hobbits now, and it's especially poignant seeing as one of the... I guess they're more of a sub-faction than anything else, but one of the new additions in 0.97 is going to be a sort of Shire sub-faction, which is of course going to be based mostly around hobbits. I'm honestly still not sure how I feel about that, to be honest with you. I feel like it's a bit of a meme that's escaped into the game, but regardless, we'll see what it brings. I would certainly at least hope that it's more of a joke faction than anything else, and they are woefully underpowered and under-equipped for the job they have to do. I certainly hope that they aren't intended to be able to operate on the same level as every other faction, but regardless, that is something that is coming, so for anyone who is a big fan of the hobbits, that is something to look forward to. But we do have an alliance of Arthedain, so we might see a couple of units of hobbits at the very least, a couple of units perhaps of slingers or Banderbrass archers hidden amongst their home, and they will be played by Mark XMD, and Gondor, of course, played by Death Eater, the player who sent me the replay, and they are going to be surrounded on all sides by an Isengard army from the north, a Rhudaur army from the east, and from the south we have an Angmar army. So all in all, fairly lore-friendly, this one. I mean, it's quite a long way for Gondor in particular to march, but even so, we certainly have a good versus evil siege here. So we'll go through the attackers first of all, and we'll start off in the south with Angmar, of course. Angmar coveting the destruction of the Shire. This is further, I think, than they've ever managed to march before, so we'll see how they perform. They've got some Angmar Marauders. Angmar Marauders, of course, more rarely seen from Angmar, because Angmar do tend to go for a little bit more quality, and they are able to do so. They do have a very strong army should they decide to go that route, but of course as orcs they are capable of bringing a very large army as well, and the Angmar Marauders are very, very numerous, so you know, you can't expect them to do too much. They are a lower end orc line infantry unit, but they will at least pad out your numbers, and in particular with the Shire, of course, because there are no walls technically. It is a siege with a town centre, but because there are no walls, it's very easy to find gaps and sort of flood over the hills, so the numbers of an orc faction will certainly come in handy here, and of course Rhudaur can bring numbers of their own, but we'll get onto them in a moment. Unsurprising to see several units of the Guardians of Carndoom as well, just with their standard rusted armour. Not really great at dealing damage. I do sing the praises of the Guardians of Carndoom quite a lot, but they aren't really a damage dealer. What really sets them apart is the fact they have a big shield and they have very thick armour as well, so very, very good at sort of staying alive and helping keep that Angmar momentum going. And momentum is a big factor in how you play Angmar. If you can keep that going, you're going to be able to roll over quite a lot of factions, but Gondor and Arthedain do have tools with which to stop them, so we'll see how well they do. They've got both units with their higher tier trolls on each flank, so Mango Masher, it should be mentioned, is playing as Angmar. Trolls of Gundabad and Trolls of Angmar. Gundabad trolls a little bit more attack focused, Angmar trolls more defense focused with that big shield. Back here we do have the upgraded variant of the Witch Realm Pikemen, of course, pikes. The Witch Realm Pikemen are on the same sort of level as the Uruk-hai Pikemen, as I've said before, but you know, they cannot be brought in quite the same numbers that Isengard can bring their pikes, but it's still a very useful tool for Angmar to bring to really anchor their line and make it very, very difficult for people to destroy Angmar in a straight up brute force contest, especially if you've got a phalanx unit right in the middle, sort of breaking things up. Witch Realm Blackguard, of course, one of the finest sword and board units in the game. In 0.96.1, they might even be the strongest. The Wardens of the White Tower would be the main competition for that, and we might see them in this battle as well, so we shall see. An Angmar catapult as well over here, so they'll be able to bombard the Shire. Very useful to bring artillery on Hobbiton, just because, again, there's no walls, and because of the shape of the hills, you know, it can be very nice to bombard them, but that does work both ways. And then some Angmar halberds at the back, obviously very, very basic halberds, but it's still armour piercing, it's still a phalanx. Provided they stay away from other phalanx units of genuine quality, they might be able to set up a front line all of their own. There's actually a unit way over here as well, which is a hidden unit, so I'm not entirely sure what it is. Could be Barrow-wights, knowing Angmar. But they do also have Snaga and Goblin units which can hide as well. So now, moving on to Rhudaur's army, played by Faye Valur. And he has got some Dunman Hunts at the front and some Rhudaur marksmen. Rhudaur's archers, of course, primarily based around sort of attrition, cheap archers, cost effectiveness, that sort of thing. Dunman Hunters especially, Rhudaur marksmen, a lot of ammo on their many quivers, but even so they're not a hugely impressive archer unit, especially not in comparison to the kind that Arthedain and Gondor can both bring. Some basic Dunman spears. Basic spears like this, of course, mostly going to be fodder in melee. But still, again, numbers on this map can be very, very useful. A unit of cavalry, which could be very useful because if Gondor and Arthedain do have a substantial cavalry force, you know, Angmar hasn't brought any cavalry by the looks of things, so someone may very well have to. And the Franadine nobles are a very strong knight unit. They have less defense than a lot of other knights, both in terms of their armor and defensive skill, but what really sets them apart from other knights is the fact that their armor piercing in melee, they pull out a nasty spiked mace, and that's a fairly significant addition against Gondor and Arthedain, because their higher tier cavalry for the most part is very heavily armoured, so the Franadine nobles could prove to be a bit of a sticking point for them. Also some Rudauer swordsmen over here, very basic, not really anything too special about them, but they get the job done. Certainly stronger than the Angmar Marauders at any rate, even though they do have slightly less men in the unit. Essenwall Trollhunters is one of the most important units you can bring as Rudauer, because they are pretty heavily armoured in comparison to the rest of the Rudauer roster. Nice shield, but also the Javelins. The Javelins are what really sets Rudauer apart. They could have some hidden units over here as well. Trollshore Axe Throwers can hide, Ferodrum Javelins can hide. There is also some Rudauer Clansmen over here. Big shield, obviously again, but basically the big brother to the Dunman Spearmen at the front. They're not going to do a huge amount of damage, even though Rudauer are a little bit more damage orientated. Big shield though, and they're going to be difficult to get rid of. In addition to that, Franadine Pikemen, possibly my favourite unit of pikes in the game, just because for what they cost, they offer an awful lot. Very, very nice indeed. Some Dunman Pikemen as well, very cheap, but very cost effective, and then some Rudauer Swordsmen as well, so kind of all over the place, but of course they will flood into the settlement and try and do what damage they can. And then finally, the Isengard army played by Artorius. He has got some Uruk-hai Raiders at the front. He's honestly, well, he's definitely got the most difficult initial assault here, because they have really set up quite hard on the Isengard approach, and it's going to be very difficult to climb up that hill and smash both the defending factions out of the way, especially with Uruk-hai Raiders and Dunlending Clansmen, although, oh, excuse me, allergies really are afflicting me at the moment. But, you know, the Dunlending Clansmen, you know, with that anti-cavalry bonus, if they do decide to charge down the hill with any cavalry, they could be in for a nasty shock. Upgraded Uruk-hai infantry are also no joke. The Uruk-hai Raiders, of course, much more basic, much more akin to the Rudauer Swordsmen and the Angmar Marauders. Pikes as well, so it's going to be difficult for them to charge down the hill. Uruk-hai Berserkers upgraded, Guards of Orthanc, some Champions of the White Hand, some Trolls of the White Hand, and some Crossbows. So, yeah, overall, if there is a cavalry charge down the hill, Isengard are pretty well positioned to receive it. The Raiders might take a bit of a beating if that is the case, but it will be able to kill off a lot of the cavalry with all the pikes, spears, crossbows, and wargs. But now we shall have a look at the defensive position. So Arthedain and Gondor reunited once again. It feels right. So we have some Fornost Rain defenders here at the front, the armoured Arthedain spears in conjunction with some Arthedain pikemen, as well as some Evendim spears, more Arthedain pikes. So again, Arthedain forming a phalanx between their spears and their pikes, also backed up a little bit by Gondor here on the flank with some slightly upgraded Gondor infantry, but also the mighty Fountain Guard. There's also some Arthedain marksmen back here, of course the Trebuchet, which is ready to just bombard the shite out of Isengard. Some Dunedain Peacekeepers, some Wardens of the White Tower over here as well, the mighty Knights of Illuminas, some more Arthedain marksmen, some Merc Warchiefs. I'm actually surprised the Merc Warchiefs are here. They are a little bit cheaper than the Fornost Rain Knights, the dismounted variant, but certainly the dismounted Fornost Rain Knights are the superior unit. The Athelian Rangers from Gondor, of course, very nice unit of Rangers. Caerandros Swordmasters also, very nice heavy swordsmen for Gondor, very heavily armoured indeed. Some Pineth Galen Cavalry, as well as some Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguards, so Gondor going for quite a few Lancers here, so there is a heavy cavalry presence for the defenders. Citadel Guard, as well as Phantom Guard. I think they were expecting Angmar to come up this flank maybe, but they're not, so they will be able to reposition all of these resources to maybe try and crush Isengard quickly. They will also need something to defend against Rudauer. Some Guards of Osgiliath, as well as some more slightly upgraded Gondor infantry. The Wardens of the North, of course, AP arrows. Caerandros marksmen, not only decent at range, although again heavily armoured archers like this maybe not the most efficient, but Caerandros marksmen do have the fact going for them that they are also quite strong in melee, pulling out a nice long sword, wielding it two-handed, so that's going to be a nice skillful unit which they can deploy should they need to. A thin line actually, a thin Arthedain phalanx of pikes and spears once again. They're going to need more than that to stop up Angmar if Angmar are quick about it. But down here there's very limited defence, and Rudauer and Angmar could combine their forces to a pretty devastating effect if they're not careful. Some more Gondor cavalry and some more Arthedain pikemen as well. So, without further ado, let's begin. And obviously the first action is going to be, just because Angmar and Rudauer will need to march a little bit before they get into position, It's going to be between Isengard and the two defenders. There's actually battle noises going on here, and I'm not entirely sure why. The Isengard forces are not quite there yet, but Isengard moving forward, you know, with pretty high level of aggression there. So the Athelian Rangers immediately shooting. We're going to have a downhill cavalry charge, I think, from the Pineth Galen cavalry. No, they're going to avoid the Dundon Clansmen. But the first engagements are happening. The Ebendim Spears colliding with the Isengard line. The Ebendim Spears will actually be overwhelmed if they're not careful, but we do also have the strength of the Caerandros Swordmasters coming in as well. There's also the cavalry, although there was a bit of a flanking force here going on. The Snaga skirmish is actually taking a charge from the Pineth Galen cavalry, but they're also being bailed out slightly by the Uruk-hai infantry. But this is going to be nasty for the Uruk-hai infantry because, of course, taking a full charge from the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard, and already Artorias' army is under a lot of pressure. Shock tactics, a lot of the cavalry, the Knights of Illuminus, are on the way down, and ironically he's actually going after the cavalry with the few units that aren't really designed to do so. You know, his pikes are charging towards the front line. He's trying to hold his flanks with the Uruk-hai infantry. Really, the Dundon Clansmen should have been used as the flanking unit, because not only are they more disposable, but they're also much more likely to do a decent amount of damage in melee to this very, very durable cavalry. The Knights of Illuminus and the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard are both very, very tough to bring down. Both of them have got very thick armour, good shields as well, although the shield's not really going to come into too much effect here. The crossbows will be able to do damage to them regardless. Pineth Galen cavalry getting a nice charge onto the Snaga as well. But you can see frontline engagement continuing. The Arthedain pikemen coming down the hill to shore up the Ebendim spearmen, who charge down quite a long way. But Isengard being very, very aggressive here. The Uruk-hai Berserkers and the Trolls heading into the same section of line. The Berserkers really should be looking for this gap here, trying to get in and around this defensive position, because Arthedain and Gondor have got a lot of strength on this front line. It's not going to be dislodged too easily. The Trolls of the White Hand will be able to do a lot of damage, especially against these Peacekeepers and the Pikemen, who don't do their damage particularly quickly. But you can see down here, Guards of Orthanc trying to shore up the line. The Pikes are over here with the Uruk-hai Raiders. There is actually, I think, yeah, the Champions of the White Hand came around here to try and do some damage, but they were very quickly overrun. The Grey Company are up here. 2 units of Grey Company by the looks of things, but the Gondor cavalry, they're spear cavalry, so they're not defenceless in melee, but I think what really did them in was the Illuminus Gate Guards, because you'd certainly expect Champions of the White Hand to cut their way through Gondor cavalry without too many issues, but with pikes right there, that would be a very different story. Meanwhile, down here, the armour piercing of the Citadel Guard, pushing down the hill, although AP is not really required to do a substantial amount of damage to Snaga skirmishers. So they're going to get poked to death really very, very quickly. Saruman himself is on the front line, but he's fighting against the mighty Fountain Guard. The Fountain Guard have taken a few losses, but the AP is going to be exactly what Gondor need on this front line, in conjunction with the Gondor infantry backing them up. A solid unit of infantry that doesn't die too easily. Gondor's front line is certainly going to hold. It's over here where Isengard are most likely to break through, and that's almost entirely down to the Trolls of the White Hand dealing quite a high amount of damage to all of the spears and pikes, units which aren't really terribly well equipped to deal with that sort of thing. Meanwhile, Gandalf's retinue bodyguard have taken a few losses, but unfortunately for the Uruk-hai crossbows, they maybe should have remained within their stakes. Then any charge would have dealt a pretty substantial amount of damage to them. But I mean, they could still do a decent amount of damage, but they're going after the Pineth Galen cavalry, which is probably exactly the unit they don't want to really be going for. They're going to get kills, but see here, the Knights of Illuminus defeat actually seems certain. They need to cycle out here. They need to cycle charge the Arthedain cavalry, because if they do, the Uruk-hai infantry won't stand a chance, and then Isengard's backlines will be completely exposed. You can actually already see, even though the crossbows are still in operation, maybe a bit of a risky move, but the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard charging uphill into the Dundon Clansmen, but already shaken. And with the amount of damage they do, that may very well be enough to send them breaking. You can see that a unit of quality cavalry like this is able to do a lot of damage off the charge, even when it's uphill like this.
They have lost half their men.
Ooh, and there's the Arthedain trebuchet shooting into the flank. It's a risky shot to make, because they could hit their own Wardens of the White Tower, but they are also causing a lot of morale issues over here, because a lot of these units on this flank for Isengard are not the finest quality, and so it's turning out to be, routing the Dundon Clansmen with the cavalry. Another trebuchet hit will probably rout the raiders as well. Here we can see the Uruk-hai infantry, they are cycling in and out now. Arthedain with their Knights of Illuminus, and that's going to sandwich the Uruk-hai infantry between what's left of the Pineth Galen cavalry. What's going on over here? So yeah, the Gondor cavalry, after beating the Champions of the White Hand, coming down here to interrupt the crossbows. getting into melee with them if they can finish off the crossbows as well. So it was always going to be difficult for Isengard. The deck was certainly stacked against them with how everyone set up their armies. But the other two factions need to hurry, honestly, because if they take too long, things are going to be... Because there is an opening here, like in particular for Rudar, there's not a lot of defenders over here, honestly, and if Rudar come forward in force, they could end up doing an awful lot of damage. And with the knights as well, I mean, there are pikes on this front line, I suppose, but we shall see. Meanwhile, over here you can see that the Angmar trolls are also in position, but a lot of Angmar's army is going around that way, which I think the attackers may be a little bit guilty of sort of engaging too strong on one side, because as soon as Isengard are done, Gondor and Arthedain are then going to be able to wheel around to primarily focus on one side. And yeah, we can see over here that the Trolls, the White Hand, they're doing their best, but there is a lot of troops for them to cut through. And in particular, with the support they're getting from the cavalry, although that was a very risky charge to make, they need to hope that they can break those pikemen, and they didn't. That was a poor charge, a poor decision there from Death Eater. I mean, the pikemen were wavering. It was a risk, but it was a risk that didn't need to be made. Didn't need to be taken, rather. They're already winning on this flank. They don't need to take risky plays like that, and there's a lot of Gandalf's retinue bodyguard they lost for no good reason there. They were going to win that front anyway, regardless of what they did. I mean, I suppose it's better to lose them than more Knights of Innuminus, but the Knights of Innuminus have been taking attritional casualties this whole time, presumably from the crossbows, because there's very little else that would do much damage to them over here. Some raiders have returned from routing.
Good tidings.
There goes the Isengard general, surrounded by Fountain Guard and Gondor infantrymen. Again, another charge into the rear of the pikes. That is enough to break them this time with the Gondor cavalry. And that's pretty much it for Isengard. I mean, you've got to feel bad for Artorias in this situation. But he didn't go down without a fight. But even so, I think the defenders will certainly be the ones happier with this engagement. Here come the Uruk-hai Raiders charging into the Knights of Innuminus as they're static, losing micro on them there. The Trebuchet has now turned around to meet the advance of Rudar. The Franadine nobles are trying to get in and around, and they have managed to get in and around, duking past the Innuminus Gate Guards, but all the cavalry busy destroying the remnants of the Isengard army. Franadine nobles able to do a lot of damage there to the Arthedain marksmen, and then Franadine nobles should be able to hold their ground against Gondor cavalry in melee. That armour piercing is a substantial leg up that they get. There is the Trebuchet again, getting a nice hit there right into the centre of the Rudar swordsman, another one towards the back of the unit. And again, I think Rudar are guilty here of being a little bit too static. They and Angmar are aggressive factions by nature, and sitting back and trying to be a little bit more defensive against Arthedain and Gondor especially is not really going to yield too much in the way of results for them. The Franadine nobles going after the Grey Company here, but they're being relentlessly chased by the retinue bodyguard, what's left of them anyway, and the Gondor cavalry. Even so, I would probably still give this fight to the Franadine nobles. They're so much stronger in melee than the retinue bodyguard, and the Gondor cavalry. There are some Pinnith Galen cavalry here as well, but it's not really getting a surround off on the Franadine nobles, so certainly in favour of them. When the Knights of Innuminus arrive, that will become a little bit too much for them to deal with, I think. But still, they could end up dealing with all of the cavalry here, which would be a decent thing to get rid of. Still, the announcer's not really thinking too much of the chances. Yeah, the Franadine nobles are holding their ground resolutely. I mean, they're going to pull out now, but they killed a lot of the Gondor cavalry there, which is a big tool that the defenders still have available to them. What have we got here? So Angmar, Gondor and Arthedain have essentially surrendered a bit more ground here at the front. They're trying to consolidate their defence closer to the town centre, which is very understandable. This hill position, however, is still looking very strong. A lot of Angmar units over there, Guardians of Khan Doom, Halberds. How on earth did these Guardians of Khan Doom get up here? A lightning strike, although it's going to be very difficult for them. I mean, a combination of Caer Andros Sword Masters and Dunedain Peacekeepers. They're getting shot from something. I mean, Rudar are now getting into position, but this is not enough to really achieve too much. Rudar are leaving far too much in reserve. If you're going to come forward, you need to come forward with everything. Otherwise, you know, units like this, Dunman Spearmen, their morale is just not good enough. Especially not against Citadel Guard. Like, Dunman Spearmen have their place in an assault, don't get me wrong, but not like this. Sending them forward on their own, sending forward fodder on its own, is a big no-no. It's not going to achieve anything other than killing them off. You know, they act as a meat shield in melee, or at range for more important units, but you're not going to achieve that if you just send them forward on their own. You can see there Knights of Numinous also just chasing them down. Pinnith Galen Cavalry charging in alongside a single Gondor cavalryman into Rudar Swordsman. Yeah, this is not good. I mean, the momentum here there's no momentum here at all for Rudar or Angmar, and I mentioned in the initial part of the battle that for Angmar in particular, momentum is very important. Let's see if this assault goes any better on this flank for Angmar. I mean, there's a lot of trolls over here, but again, they're pulling out. They're not really feeling too confident about this engagement, nor should they, because the only backup they have are Angmar Marauders. And Citadel Guard are in there as well, and Citadel Guard, of course, one of the very few spear units that are AP. And possibly, you know, again, only Gondor really has got high-tier armor-piercing spears. And you can see that some trolls are falling away. Again, being backed up by those Arthedain pikemen. There's some heavy swordsmen in there as well, the Carandros Swordmasters. Some javelins being just launched up into the air, going after the Angmar Marauders. Again, they're in range of archers at this point, so you know, they're either going to need to charge in or they're just going to sit there and get shot to death. Still, this is far too stretched out for me. Both Angmar and Rudar are just not committing forward enough, quickly enough. Like, they're dribbling into these engagements, and Gondor and Arthedain are both factions which can take this sort of assault all day long. Rudar clansmen charging up the hill, but again, they're just basic spears. And they are going to have to engage with Citadel Guard in melee of all things. The AP is actually not going to be terribly useful against Rudar in all honesty, but the Citadel Guard are just a stronger unit by nature, so they're still going to win very comfortably. These Arthedain pikemen have been surrounded a little bit, but the Dunedain Peacekeepers are on their way over as well. The Illuminous Gate Guards are also there to help hold the line. Yeah, this assault collapsed really very, very quickly. Some Fountain Guard are manoeuvring. They're a little bit isolated here. This would be an opportunity actually for Angmar to overwhelm and destroy them. Or at the very least coax them into sort of having to commit more men forward to save them. Because the Fountain Guard are a unit you can't really afford to lose in a careless fashion. But again, they've missed their opportunity really. Some Snaga archers are shooting them, but not too much of a concern for the Fountain Guard. The Angmar Marauders are charging in, but yeah. I mean, they're going to charge in, but again, they're not going to achieve much of anything. They're going up against quality Gondorian infantry. Wardens of the White Tower are right there as well. I mean, this is a very lopsided engagement. Fountain Guard, Citadel Guard, and Wardens of the White Tower. Already wavering. Unsurprising, to say the least. Well, you can see over here that some of the Athelian Rangers, presumably out of ammunition, which, again, they must have used a lot of their ammunition right at the start against Isengard. A decent hit there from the Angmar catapult, but it's on Gondor archers, not really the most important target. And yeah, there go the Rudar clansmen. Oh, excuse me. Grey Company again doing some damage, a lot of arrow fire coming in here. Again, it's just basic archers that are doing this, but against pikes in the side as well. Dunman pikemen over here as well, very nice target for archers to go after. Forward come the Rudar swordsmen going up against the Mercenary War Chiefs. It's an engagement the Mercenary War Chiefs should actually quite enjoy. They're a little bit depleted. Numinous Gate Guard's a little bit of a messy engagement over here, which should favour Angmar and Rudar, but more reinforcements are being added all the time. A lot of range support coming in. Still, there's too many units just languishing in the background there, being useless. The Athelian Rangers marching forwards as well. Forward come the Fountain Guard, so no rest for the weary on this front. See what's happening over here. They're really not eager to charge up this hill, Angmar, and at this point, yeah, I mean, all of the units that are on this hill can counter-attack down into Angmar because they're moving forward, concentrating almost all of their force into going after the town centre. Look at all the dead trolls. But this means, of course, they can surround them, and that's not going to be good because a lot of these units, other than the Guardians of Khan Doom and the Trolls, are relatively low tier. Snaga Stalkers. Trolls of Gundabad are over here, but again, it's not easy units they're going up against. Like, Trolls will pay the price against quality units, and the Carandros Swordmasters can certainly count themselves as a quality unit. Trolls definitely need support if they're to be used at their most effective, but the only support the Trolls have been given for the most part in this battle has been lower tier units of infantry, which are just not prepared to hold the line alongside them. see here. Yeah, they are counter-attacking down the hill. They're doing exactly the right thing here, Gondor. They can see the opening. And unfortunately, that was a bit of friendly fire, I believe. Which is the last thing Snaga Stalkers need, because they are one of the units which is very, very likely to rout indeed. Still, arrow fire. There are Barrow Wights on the way forward, so we know how strong Barrow Wights are, but I still feel as though the defenders have played a good game so far. And the attackers have not. But still, the defenders always have a bit of a job to do to try and beat the attackers when they're outnumbered, especially on a map like this. I mean, Hobbiton is difficult to defend because it's so open. It's not like you can rely on your walls to do a lot there. That's a huge rout, that. And again, if you don't send forward a substantial enough force, it will rout in the face of a defence like this. In the trees, you can see the guards of Osgiliath and fully upgraded Gondor infantry moving forwards as well. The only thing standing in their way really is Snaga archers, which, needless to say, will not be standing in their way for too much longer. So Karandros Markman also taking up a very nice position on the hill, shooting down into the trees, making sure that that Angmar army stays running for the hills. Stalkers running, archers running. Angmar are in real trouble here. They don't have an awful lot left. I mean, they've got nothing left on this side, which of course means Gondor and Arthain can focus fully on this front over here. Starting to send forward some more stuff now. Here comes the catapult shots. Going very wide there. There's only a single troll left. And he's dead. Rip. Some Rudar Axemen have come forward. They were hiding. A unit we seldom see because of how weak they are to arrow fire, but against Gondor, not a bad choice because their AP will be very, very useful. The Barrow Wights are lumbering into position to give them a hand. Again, if this unit had moved forward with the last assault in overwhelming force on this side, it could have been a different story, but again, wave-based assaults, man. Attacking in waves, defending in waves. There's a time and a place for it. It has to be done in the correct way, and this is exactly the wrong way. It's almost a textbook example of how it can go horribly wrong. Granadine Nobles charging into the back of the Merc War Chiefs. That's enough to break them. They've got lower morale by design, and the Granadine Nobles have got a brutal charge. It's a lot of pikes, though. Not easy for the Rudar Knights to do the business here. Black Bolts are moving forward, multiple HP. Very similar to the Uruk-hai Berserkers in function. Not quite as strong, but also cheaper. They're large, I think stone axes, I think it is, that they use. Brutal. Granadine Pikemen also marching forth into position. Ooh, the Arthedain Trebuchet, though, able to hit the Barrow Wights, which is the perfect way to deal with them, of course. You can have as many hit points as you want, and a direct hit from a Catapult or a Trebuchet will still finish you off. Charging down the hill, Gondor infantry. It really is all hands on deck now, the Rudar marksmen having to be committed to melee. There are the Witchhound Blackguard over here, which, yeah, they should beat the Dunedain Peacekeepers. But the Wardens of the North are right here. They pulled out their long swords. They'll be a little bit more hardier opponents in melee. Over here, I mean, looks like a few units from Angmar did come back from routing. There are some Barrow Wights over here as well. But the Gondorians honestly should be just fine. And again, more friendly fire from the Angmar catapult. Those Guardians of Kandum aren't going to last much longer. Neither are the Snaga skirmishers. And honestly, Gondor should have enough over here, as long as they can stop those Snaga archers from shooting, to overwhelm and destroy the Barrow Wights, especially with a bit of range support. Over here, Witchhound Blackguard still doing their thing. Elsewhere, though, I don't think there's enough quality on the line anymore. The Grey Company rear-charging the Barrow Wights, we've seen that recently. Barrow Wights' victory seems certain. And over here there are the Franadine Pikemen, and the Franadine Pikemen are good. And they're still fairly high in number, supported by the Attenmore's Troll Hunters. Attackers are starting to have a little bit more joy.
We've lost control of the city.
I think that's finally the end of the Isengard army. They had something left, I guess, which has finally routed or been destroyed utterly. Franadine Pikemen fighting on the front line, a few Karandros Swordmasters coming in, but the support of the Attenmore's Troll Hunters is the key here. And this just goes to show, if Rudauer had come forward in force earlier, they could have done crippling damage on this flank, I think. especially with some of the Angmar support that they've been given. And there's Black Walls coming in. Black Walls are very, very strong armor-piercing units, so Gondor are going to continue to struggle over here. Karandros Marksman getting into position to shoot. Arthane Pikemen marching across, so attackers are starting to come back into it somewhat. The defenders don't really have anything of genuine quality they can send over to stop the march of the Witcher-Ram Blackguard either. Everything's having to be wheeled over to the other flank to stop Rudauer's redeemed assault. And over here, I mean, Gondor, they're having to keep these units over here because the Barrow Wights are over here, but the Barrow Wights, they will lose this fight in the long run, I'm sure, especially with the addition of some more marksmen coming down here. Good in melee, of course. Those artillery shots, I mean, they could affect the fight, but they could also get some friendly fire, which would be devastating. But the Barrow Wights will hold these units in place for quite a long time, which of course will prevent reinforcements from arriving elsewhere. This engagement over here, the Witcher-Ram Blackguard's still hacking their way through. There's some routing going on as well. Certainly not what Gondor and Arthedain want to see. Arrow fire is of course the kryptonite for Black Bolt, however they've got no armour at all. They are multiple HP, but as soon as that's gone, arrows will rip through them. Armour-piercing damage, though, is still doing its thing. That trebuchet, though, is still proving to be a big factor. And the Barrow Wights have taken a lot of damage as a result of it. They're also taking damage in melee now. Granadine Rangers are here. That's body-piercing projectiles, which I think they're shooting at the trebuchet, which is honestly a bit of a waste. They're not going to be able to kill the trebuchet crew off in its entirety. They really need to be shooting into the infantry blob with that. Attenmore's Troll Hunters being committed to melee, presumably out of ammunition. Certainly helping to push Gondor back a little bit with their armour-piercing projectiles, but now, in melee, beating the Dunedain Rangers as well. They can take arrows a little bit better than most of the other Rudauer units as well, with their better armour, their decent shields. Forward come the Wardens of the White Tower, though, pushing through a gap in the line, trying to help them out. Those Rangers still going after the Trebuchet crew. I mean, they're killing the Trebuchet crew off, but it's not going to be quick enough, and it's also not really worth it. I mean, the Trebuchet must not have much ammunition left. What's going on over here? Still a decent number, well, I say that, a decent number of Barrow Wights. The Barrow Wights are starting to be killed off now, so more units are being cycled over here. I think the defenders are going to be able to weather the storm that they've gone through in the mid-game here. More units heading over in support. Whatever happens to the Witcher-Ram Blackguard, there are still 30 of them left alive. They're actually they joined this engagement over here, and so too did some Karandros Marksmen and the Wardens of the North. So yeah, the Witcher-Ram Blackguard, I think, is not going to be enough. Their quality is very high, but it's not going to be enough in the long run. Reforged Javelins are all the way forward. Again, another very damaging unit, which perhaps should have been committed forward sooner. You could say that, you know, archers would have just shot them, but archers, Arthedain and Gondor couldn't have shot everything. If everything came forward all at once, they would have had to pick and choose their targets. And if it were me, I certainly would have gone after the Reforged Javelins. But that, of course, would have meant that there would have been less arrows going into the Black Bolts, less going into the Barrow Wights, less going into your pikes. In the end, I think it probably would have been worth it. A good while. Some Rudauer swordsmen down here. Also some Arthedain pikes. They're wavering. Also, that's interesting. So the Band of Brass archers have been in play. Haven't noticed them. The diminutive hobbits slipping under the radar, and they're going to go after the catapult crew. A fight they should win. Catapult crew very poor in melee, Band of Brass archers, huge numerical advantage. Here on the front line, the Witcher-Ram Blackguard still doing their thing. Trebuchet still doing its thing as well. What's going on over here? The Black Bolts have retreated from the line a little bit, trying to give the Reforged Javelins a bit of breathing room. Gondor archers marching forwards. Gondor infantry fully upgraded. The Fountain Guard, who are just beasts on the front line. Sitting quite happily in that engagement for a long time, doing the damage, doing the business. And now over here, the Witcher-Ram Blackguard. They're strong, but again, they're just being overwhelmed over time. I'm sure that they've got a lot of kills against decent units as well, but I think this is where they ultimately peter out a little bit. There are still Wardens of the North in there, Karandros Marksmen, I should say, and no slouches in melee either. They are dying at a fairly swift rate, but regardless. There goes the Gondor General. Attenmore's Troll Hunters stabbing him through with their spears. Catapult crew is getting ground down by the hobbits. Granadine Rangers are now being forced to commit in melee as Gondor start to pour forwards, although the Gondor infantry routing there. If the Granadine Rangers still have a bit of ammunition, they need to reform and get some more shots off. Gondor trying to push a little bit too far there. Going after the Reforged Javelins, it's understandable. I mean, there are three ranged units, which are very, very potent over here. But still, the Reforged Javelins were never going to be a soft target in melee. Ooh, and that's a Warden of the White Tower that shanked the Witch Realm Blackguard General. Carandros Marksman pushing forwards, engaging the Granadine Rangers in melee. The Marksman will be stronger there. Rangers have got good melee skill, but the Marksmen are strong in melee, as well as having that thick Gondorian plate. The Blackwolds still fighting their hardest on the front line, and they will have done a lot of damage because they haven't really taken a huge amount of arrow fire. And they've been engaged with exactly the sort of units they like going up against. Armour-focused infantry, the kind that Gondor traffics in. What's going on over here? There's still this fight going on, I'm sure. There's a very limited engagement. Yeah, there's a couple of Barrow-wights left against a very depleted unit of Gondor infantry. But the Gondor infantry will ultimately win that because the Barrow-wights are almost completely gone. What have we here? Andros Marksman. Again, throwing themselves in front of the Blackwolds. It's again the sort of unit that the Blackwolds will really like fighting. But the Blackwolds have been in melee for quite some time, and again, as soon as their hit points are gone, their melee skill is quite low as well, which is not good news. Like again, they're very much a flash in the pan sort of unit. They're capable of doing a lot of damage very, very quickly, but they do tend to peter out as a long battle goes on. Arthedain pikemen, very depleted in number. There goes the Rudar General. Looks like he was shot by something as well. The Grey Company chasing him down? They are indeed. So the Grey Company killing him off. There's only 2 Granadine nobles left alive. Again, a unit of knights though. Quite capable of doing a lot of damage in that sort of situation. But well, in this sort of situation I should say. But yeah, I just think that the defenders have just got a little bit too much. The Reforged Javelins now are wavering. Again, Rudauer, they are an evil men faction. They do have a few morale issues. And 89 Reforged Javelins routing. That's a real disaster, because again, they could have done something in this fight. The Reforged Javelins are strong in melee, multiple HP, armour piercing with those big spiked clubs. But ultimately their morale just fell apart. I mean, even if they stayed, I don't think they would have actually won the fight, but they could have made more of a fist of it than they have. Arthedain Marksman shooting the Blackwolds in the back. I'm pretty sure that the Blackwolds as a Berserker type unit have got locked morale. So the only thing which will cause them to break are like army losses or being completely overwhelmed in the late game. Wardens of the North coming in, still taking arrow fire in the back as well, which of course terrible news for Blackwolds. Pikes coming in. Will those Rudauer units regroup, I wonder? I don't think they will. That collapse on the Rudauer front might be... I mean, it did come shortly after they lost their general as well, so that might be one of the few times where the loss of a general actually does really affect the battle in a significant way. They have regrouped, to be fair, but I don't think it's going to matter too much. The Reforged Javelins do still have some ammunition as well. Although those 4 Grey Company men are just going to shoot right down the line. Be able to get a volley off, I think. Indeed they are. Reforged Javelins are capable of dishing out quite a lot of punishment as well with their javelins. Certainly one of the stronger javelins in the game. Not quite as mighty as the Demons of the Desert, of course, but still, nothing is. Blackwolds, there's still a fight going on over here. Did those Gondor infantry break? They didn't. Still just 2 Barrow-wights clinging on for dear life, as they are wont to do. Yeah, they're still going to fight. I think the Blackwolds up here are still barely alive. Yeah, there's still a couple of them. A trio, but they're up against Fountain Guard. There's the General as well, actually, the Arthedain General. The Wardens of the North are over here. The Blackwolds are going to fall away, so I think it's clear to see that the defenders are going to win this. Guards of Osgiliath marching down as well. I think that's going to rout, yeah, I mean, the Reforged Javelins proving themselves to not be the most resolute unit, especially when their general dies. Crown of Nine Nobles also falling away. Frodo and Sam are still alive, actually, in the Band of Brass Archer unit, despite being engaged in some melee fights, although Frodo probably doesn't want to be near these two. They are wavering, I know, but you can see how quickly they're just skewering these hobbits. He's getting a slice in there. Oh dear. Frodo taking a shot in the back of the head by the Grey Company. Yeah, I think he's going to live. He is going to live. Fascinating. Well, those Black Bolts also died off, and I think there's... Well, there is some Rudar marksmen in the trees over there. But I wonder if those... Here with the Barrow-wights just lumbering down the road, just a couple of them, rolling into town. But I think the last engagement is going to be between the marksman and the rest of the units. So there's some routing Carandros marksmen there, the Rudar marksmen. They are going to be caught on all sides. There's some wavering Gondor infantry as well. Now they're just shaken though. The Rudar units will surely rout before the Gondorian ones in this sort of situation. The Gondorians are just converging on all sides on the Rudar units. A player admitted defeat, I'm sure that is the Angmar player, which would only leave the Rudar units. So the Rudar marksmen, according to this, are going to last more than 1,000 frames, which is interesting in its own way. The Band of Brass Archers have come back to fight the Reforged Javelins, which means Frodo and Sam have almost certainly had their skulls caved in by those spiked clubs. And the Rudar marksmen still holding their ground. Actually, they did manage to break off the Gondor infantry. Almost killed them to the last man, in fact. But this is where the fight ends. The Guards of Osgiliath now marching in. Phalanx down. Imagine this is where the Rudar marksmen will start to break as well, taking a rear assault from infantry and the Wardens of the North. Yeah, they're wavering. This is going to be the end of them, surely. They've held their nerve better than the Reforged Javelins have. Which is, again, one of those things. The pikes turning around, an interesting glitch that is in Medieval 2, and now they're routing. And there go the Band of Brass Archers. And yep, Frodo and Sam are both dead. They're around here somewhere, I'm sure. Oh, there they are. Sam over there, Frodo there. Just lying dead in the dirt. The Reforged Javelins, they've been not exactly the most impressive unit in this fight with what the wavering they've done in the wake of their general's demise, but the Reforged Javelins with one last screw you to the Shire, as their army is going to inevitably fall apart here. Favalur, his last unit. Ironically, probably the one that let him down the most as well. As the Javelin men try and get a few last kills. Yeah, they're gonna break on contact as soon as those units get into melee with them. They're already wavering. They might break before that, actually. Then their humiliation would be complete. No, they're well. As soon as they got into melee, that was it. So yeah, well played from the defenders. Again, this was there for the attackers to win if they had coordinated a little better. At least Angmar and Rudauer. Isengard really didn't have that luxury. They certainly got singled out and overwhelmed very early on. Artorius couldn't have done too much more with that. I think maybe the difference he could have made was sending the infantry up the middle and then sending his spears around the flank. That was a bit of an odd choice to send his Uruk-hai infantry off to the flank because they were always going to be less efficient there than the Dunlending clansmen, I should say. But even so, he still would have struggled relentlessly to try and turn that fight around. But very well played from the defenders. Obviously, Gondor getting quite a lot more kills than Arthedain, actually, which is interesting. Not really sure what the cause of that would be, but let's find out what got the most kills. What was the MVP for Death Eater's Gondorian army? It was 360 for a unit of Citadel Guard, so it does go to show how much of a difference AP on spears can make, because a unit of high tier spears like the Tirithea, the Dol Amroth high tier spears, the Tirithea Wardens, They would have got nowhere near 360 kills, and they're of a similar cost, and the main difference is they do not have AB. And Citadel Guard do, and that's the difference that it makes. And it's a big thing that Gondor have available to them that other factions don't. The Fountain Guard did very well as well. The other unit of Citadel Guard did well. All really of the Gondorian archers also pulled their weight. The Athelian range is getting 256 kills, which is decent for on this map. Like a more traditional siege with walls and more clearly defined choke points, rangers can start to get up into the 1,000 kill range. But on this map they did a good enough job, especially against Isengard very early on. And the other archers also did well throughout the battle. Most of Gondor's army honestly did quite well. The cavalry also against Isengard early on did the business, even if the retinue bodyguard maybe could have got more kills if they didn't charge into those pikes. But regardless, still very well played from Gondor and Arthedain. Commiserations to the attackers, but again, it's all part of a learning process, because I think I haven't seen Mango Masher or Favour Lure in battles before, so maybe this was one of their first, and it wasn't too bad for a first attempt if that was indeed the case. But again, that would be the lesson to take away from this battle. I think you need to, when you attack, you can't afford to do it in waves in the way that Rudauer and Angmar did in this battle. Like, their waves were far too flimsy. Like, the first wave was honestly probably what lost Angmar and Rudauer this battle. The fact they sent up all of their weak units first. Angmar did send their trolls, but only backed up by weak units, which meant they got singled out as well. The weak units achieved nothing. They just died and didn't really get too many kills. When they committed forward their more substantial waves, they started to make some progress, especially Rudauer with that AP. Got a lot of kills. If they had sent forward their whole force all at once, could have been a different story. The numbers of Gondor and Arthedain may not have been able to hold every angle. Could have found some gaps, and with the strong units that Rudauer and Angmar have available to them, they could have made up for the fact their fodder was not as strong. But yeah, regardless, it's all part of the learning curve, and big thank you to Death Eater for sending this one in. As I said, I do have a Moria siege in the pipeline that's upcoming for Reforged. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.